Back for part 2 of lecture 2. We're going to be talking about the price elasticity of supply. We use ES for the symbol for the coefficient, and this works very similar to the price elasticity of demand. Again, we're after how much of a product will a producer make, how much more of a product will a producer make when the price increases. So you know again that when the price goes up, we're going to find a higher quantity supplied. That's a law of supply. And when the price goes down, we're going to find quantity supplied going down. But the question is, how much? So how much less of a product will a producer make when the price drops? Likewise, how much more of a product will it make when the price increases? And so we're after the responsiveness of producers to changes in price. So we have a very similar equation here. This is the definition equation. There's also a midpoint, which we're not going to use. And so just like with cross price and income elasticity, the price elasticity of supply will have one equation, and that is the definition equation. And so it's very similar. We take the percent change in quantity supplied and divide that by the percent change in price. And this one's always going to be positive anyway without doing the absolute value, because that's what the law of supply says over here. In the same areas, if it's greater than 1, we have elastic. And so that means the percent change in quantity supplied is more than the percent change in price. So if price goes up by, say, 2%, and then quantity supplied goes up by 6%, that would be elastic. That would be 6 over 2, and so elasticity would be 3. And then if it's less than 1, that means the price goes up by 2% again. Maybe the quantity supplied only goes up by 1%. And that would be 1 over 2, and that would be 1/2, 0.5. And then if it's the same number, 2%, it'll be 1. And that's called, again, unitary elastic. So what determines the price elasticity of supply? It pretty much is the makeup of the firm. How much excess capacity do they have? Excess capacity is the capacity, the labor, the capital, the resources that are currently not being used. So if you are a manufacturer of automobiles like General Motors, and maybe you have 3 or 4 plants, you're only running maybe 1 shift a week, you have excess capacity. You could run maybe a second shift, a night shift, and then a graveyard shift. And so you have lots of excess capacity. So if the price goes up, you can easily increase production pretty fast. But let's say you're currently running all your factories with 3 shifts, you have no more excess capacity. So if the price keeps going up for what you're selling, you really can't produce any more, and therefore you would have a very low elasticity number. No matter who you are, it increases with time. If we give you more time to add on to your capacity, more office buildings, more manufacturing facilities. Chaffey College means we can build more classrooms, expand our online offerings, things like that. So it's pretty much the limitations of your production facilities in the short run prevent firms from responding with large increases in production. The short run, again, is when we have a time period when we can change some of our inputs, our resources, but not all of them. What it means is that our physical structure, our capital structure is we're not able to change it during the particular time period. So that'll be like a restaurant where you're dealing with maybe a week-to-week operations of your restaurant. You can add more labor, you can get more tables in maybe, you can hire more staff, get more produce, but you can't really expand the size of your restaurant. You have only so many places where customers can eat, you have only so many parking spots, things like that. And then in the long run, you can change anything. So in the longer run, if you can change the size of your restaurant, the size of your college, the size of your factories, then you have much more flexibility and your elasticity number is going to become greater. So economists have identified 3 different time periods. We have a market time period, and that's when the quantity supplied is constant. We can't change it. It's perfectly inelastic. Short run is when you have at least one business input is constant, Usually we mean capital, which is the plant capacity or the size of your restaurant or the size of your college. And then the long run, the supply tends to be more inelastic there. So there's some flexibility, but not much. In the long run, you can change anything. You can change the size of your business. You can add on more, again, classrooms. You can add on more parking spots. You can increase the size of your warehouse and so forth. Then you have more flexibility and becomes more elastic. So it looks like this. So your market period is perfectly inelastic, and this is price, quantity supplied. And so here it's a vertical line for the market period. And maybe a good analogy would be maybe a business that deals with selling fish to restaurants. So maybe you have operations down maybe next Laguna Beach or San Pedro, somewhere right there, or maybe Long Beach, where you have a fleet of fishing boats that can go out, say in the early morning, or maybe I think they go out at night and they come back in the early morning. And so once the ships come in, the fishing boats come in, how much fish they bring in is fixed for the day. So the market period would be the supply of fish for that day. And that's why if you're go to a nice restaurant and you want to buy some fish, on the menu there might not be a price there because they don't know what the price is going to be, because they don't know how many fish are going to come in that day, and therefore the price can vary from day to day. And so they would say market price. And then the short run, you have maybe 6 fishing boats in your fleet, so you can send out anywhere from 1 to 6 that day. So you have some flexibility. But once you get to 6, you really can't send out any more, and so you're limited. So if there's a greater demand for your fish, you might send out more fishing boats the next day, and so on. But again, your flexibility is limited by the size of how many fishing boats you have. In the long run, you can buy more fishing boats, and therefore you have more flexibility. So market period, you can't change anything, and the supply is vertical, perfectly inelastic. Short run, you can change some of your inputs, but not all of them. Long run, you can change everything. So here's a flexibility. If the price goes up, there's no change in the market period because you don't have enough time. The fish already came in that day. And then the short run, you have some flexibility. You increase here. In the long run, when the price is higher, you can increase a lot more. Well, you might want to say, why don't you have this all the time, that kind of flexibility, even in the short run? Well, it's very expensive to carry all that capacity. Say you're going to buy a fleet of 100 fishing boats. Well, if you only use maybe 6 on average each day, why buy 100? You may need 100 maybe 2 times a year or something. Very expensive to buy those and very expensive to maintain them. And so there is a cost to having this flexibility here. And so like everything in life, it's a trade-off. Last things, I came up with some numbers here. It's actually hard to get elasticity of supply numbers because this is information that the businesses do not want to release because they don't want to have their competitors to see this information, how flexible they can be with their operations. And so it is kind of hard to get this information. So I came up with just a few numbers, just to give you an idea. And so if the number for in the short run is 0.3, and so this tells us if the price goes up by 10%, they can increase production of cotton a little bit in the short run by 3%. But you give them more time, they can plant more fields, get more equipment, then they can increase it by 10%. And it becomes more elastic in the long run. Steel from mini mills, these are not your old-fashioned blast burners that produce iron or take iron ore and turn it into steel. These are very lean operations which use scrap metal. And so they buy up scrap metal and they melt it down and they make new products out of it. And so in the long run, the number is 1.2. So if the price goes up by 10%, they can increase their production by 12%. Again, very lean, much more profitable than the old-fashioned blast furnaces. And that's pretty much a lot of where our steel is being manufactured now in the United States. Okay, that's lecture 2. We have 2 parts of lecture 2 on other elasticities, and then the last part of chapter 5 is to talk about elasticity and how it relates to taxes. These are sales taxes, taxes on consumption, and what impact these types of taxes have on efficiency for markets.